you have an MFA from the University of York.
Yep.
You completed last year in April,
Yes, yeah.
and you've been practicing as an artist for a very long time. Can we go back?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say I've been practicing as a professional artist at least since 2017. I started kind of right out of high school. I took a year before I kind of realized that this was the career path that I was going to take. And from then, I went and did my bachelor's in visual arts at Grenfell University here in Newfoundland in Corner Brook. And then after that, I decided to do my master's. So I took a year off in between to save up some money, and then I went and I did my master's in Toronto at York.
You are the daughter and the granddaughter, grand-granddaughter of Newfoundlanders settlers.
Yes, yeah,
At
that's
the,
correct.
at the same time, you lived in Alberta, so you have that experience, that bi-coastal
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah, for sure. My family has been in Newfoundland since the early 1800s, except for, a couple of trips back and forth to the mainland, I'm sure. I was born in a small place in Alberta called Provost, but I lived mostly in Fort McMurray till I was about 11 years old. My grandparents and I guess, like you said, my settlers were originally Irish and English descent that came to Newfoundland in the very beginning. And a lot of them use textiles, which is the medium that I'm interested in, um, mostly for things that were of necessity rather than fine art. But I kind of like to think about my roots in that way and how I'm continuing to use textiles almost in honor of them.
In fact, your mother is a quilter.
Yeah, she is. And my grandmother knits, like she could sit down and knit a pair of socks in an hour.
And you decided to collect and work with found items.
Hmm.
How did you decide on that?
I've always had a bit of an affinity for collecting little scraps and bits of things. I started creating these I call them junk journals, but they've almost evolved into more of a scrapbook at this point. But basically, I had an art project in I think it was grade 10 or grade 11 where my art teacher inspired us to find scraps of paper and then create a book out of the scraps of paper. And some of the scraps of paper that I had found for that book were grocery lists and to-do lists and other things that weren't even of my own writing. So some of them were my mom's, my grandparents, and whatnot. Um, and it took me a couple years to realize how interesting that actually was for me. So it wasn't until I think my second or maybe even my third year of my bachelor's degree that I started collecting these grocery lists that I found at various grocery stores in my area. Um, and then I didn't really know what to do with them at that point, but I grew a little collection. I tried a couple different mediums. I tried putting them in picture frames just as they are. Um, I did a couple different print processes with them. I did like intaglio print process with the list, but I ended up using them for a textiles project. And the original idea was to eventually make a whole quilt out of grocery lists, and I still may or may not do that someday. But these are what they look like. So it's two pieces of fabric and embroidered text, and the embroidered text is as similar as I could possibly make it to the original list that I had found. So I found over, I would say, 1,000 lists at this point, but I've only created about 50 because they're decently time consuming to recreate. Um, yeah.
It is important that you emphasize the fact that mundane things, repetition, are crucial in your art.
I'm a very stop and smell the roses type person. I've always enjoyed the littlest things and the mundanity, the routine of every day. Um, so it really comes through in my artwork. It started off with these lists, but has expanded into other works like my shopping bags, which you can see a couple here behind me. In my residency in UHA, I plan on embroidering my mom's recipe cards, which are mostly Newfoundland recipes, and they're beautifully handwritten and stained. And I'm excited to dive into that project.
Let's talk about your fridges.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that idea?
So if you think about the list, I was thinking about the list as maybe an not so much of an inanimate object, but something that needed a place to live. So I decided to come up with somewhere that my list would like to live. So I came up with a fridge because that's where I keep my lists at home is on my fridge. And then the shopping cart was also a derivative of that because that's a common place where I usually find the lists when I go to the grocery stores is left in the shopping cart. So the very first fridge I made for my graduating show for my bachelor's degree was just a wooden frame with the front was metal and it was pretty simple. I did it in a couple months and I had all my lists magnetized to the front of the fridge. It's made out of like fabric and pillow stuffing, so it was quite plush. Um, and then the second fridge I made, I decided I wanted it to be a little more interactive. So I decided to make a fridge that could actually open. During my bachelor's degree graduation show, I had a lot of people try to open the fridge, but it was just a plush box. So there was nothing to open. And I thought it would be interesting to see people's reactions if it could actually open and what the inside might look like.
Your lists also they capture moments in time, how people lived at a certain time.
That's 100% true. And, you know, I've been collecting now for 5 or 6 years, and it's gotten harder and harder and harder to find these lists. There was one time where I would go to the store and I would find 6 or 7, and now it's maybe one every now and then. People are using technology-based lists more and more, and there's two things I find is a bit of a loss. There's a loss in actual cursive writing because children don't learn how to handwrite anymore. It's mostly printed if there is any, and there's a loss of actually writing a physical list because people are more inclined to have their phones on them and less likely to lose the list on their phone, which is another layer on top of this as well.
Behind you, you have a big Walmart bag. How did you make that one?
So this one is made out of $600 worth of organza fabric and wool. So I had a 32-inch hoop, which is like about this big, and a really big darning needle. And I embroidered it the same way I would embroider anything else, but using wool and a very large amount of fabric on the floor of my apartment. And believe it or not, this one was one of the quicker ones to make. Something like this one took a lot longer.
Your shopping bags are also a statement on consumerism.
100%. Um, Almost unintentionally, perhaps. I'm more, I think, interested in the idea of them being a useful versus unuseful object. How there's something that you need so desperately at the moment, but if you lose it, you're not going to go looking for it. It's similar to those lists as like as I said, they're useful. You use them, but once you're done with them, they get discarded and there's no longer a need to have it. So they are and they're not. I'm not unaware that people may see that in my work, but it's not something that I consciously think of.
You're back in Newfoundland. What's it like to be back?
I'm so happy to be back in Newfoundland. I did enjoy my time in Toronto, and I haven't been in Alberta since I was very young, but uh, I like the community here. I know most people within the arts community, and I have a little bit of a home here at the Rotary Arts Center. I teach classes with Sam Osmond every blue moon, and it's nice to be home.
And this year is going to be a very busy year for you.
Hopefully. I just recently applied to go back to school in September. I'm going to do an education degree in St. John's, Newfoundland. So hopefully I will be an art teacher one of these days.
Are you planning on coming back to Corner Brook or staying in St. John's area?
I would like to come back to Corner Brook. The weather on this side of the island is quite nice, but also the arts community over here is very engaging.
You wrote a long thesis for your master's degree,
Yes.
and your past experiences, you know, built into that thesis.
Mhm.
How did you research that?
I always said that the thesis paper I wrote, which I think was like 40 pages or something, it was actually one of the easiest papers I've ever had to write, surprisingly, because it's all kind of contained up here. You're writing from your own memories and from your heart rather than trying to find information about someone else. Um, and it went by pretty smoothly. And it was a lot more casual than I had expected it to be. I was really nervous because I have always been dyslexic, so I've always had a little bit of a harder time researching and reading things. It takes me a little while to get through something, especially if it's very theoretical or very wordy. I find that difficult, but when it comes from your heart, it's so much easier just to tell your own life story.
You are using a lot of textile, a lot of fiber, but you're also incorporating metal, plastic.
Mhm. I usually try to keep the metal and the plastic and the other materials as just my armature. Anything that's visible to somebody is usually textiles.
Are you also collaborating with other artists?
Not at this moment, however, I'm definitely open to doing so. There have been artists reach out to me, and I will definitely look forward to that in the future. There are no plans as of yet.
How do people respond to your type of art, which is very unique?
I actually really am prideful on how my art is perceived by people. I think my original goal and part of the reason I went with textiles was to allow the everyday viewer to enjoy a little bit of fine art and not feel unwelcome in a gallery space. Um, I had a really lovely experience at the Eastern Edge Gallery in St. John's, where I had lots of family and friends come to visit. And one of my goddaughter, actually, I think she was 8 at the time. She was going around and grabbing people by the hand and saying, "Come look at this, come look at this." And then she would show them that the magnets came off the fridge and you can move things around. And she was very excited. And I I got a lot of like elderly people who wouldn't be so inclined to come into the studios or the gallery space. Um, and they always seem to really enjoy it. So it's very playful. It's very light-hearted. There's no serious critique of anything. Um, I'm not saying that you can't take away your own critiques, but I personally don't have any serious critiques. And yeah, it's been a really fun ride, I gotta say.
Have you been invited to give workshops?
Yeah, for sure. I actually just did a Christmas crafting workshop here at the Corner Brook Library. I have another one scheduled for Valentine's Day through the Rotary Arts Center at the library as well, doing some textile garland crafts. Um, I've done a grocery list making workshop through Eastern Edge once upon a time, years ago. And I'm definitely open to doing more. I also teach classes to junior high students, like after school art classes here on the weekends. I actually just finished one.
If someone would like to learn more about working with found objects, environmental artwork, Where could they go? Is there a book or an article that they could refer to?
Oh, there's so many, so many. I'm really interested in there's this magazine set called Found. I wish I had them here with me. They're at home, but they basically is this humongous collection of found objects that people have sent in to this author who has compiled them all into this book. Actually, multiple books. I think there's like 12 of them, but they're really hilarious, good coffee books just to flip through and see the kinds of things that people have left behind. Like anything from like photos to grocery lists to whatever the case may be, notes on cars, whatever. And there's also one book that has been kind of really similar to what I'm doing. It's called Milk, Eggs, Vodka, and it's just a compilation of people's grocery lists in a book, which is really fun. And I would be interested in maybe doing that with my own collection someday.
How can people find you?
I have a website. It's just my full name, so it's ShannynReid .com. Or you can find my Instagram with the same name. It's just Shannyn Reid Art on Instagram. I usually post a lot of stories and things on my Instagram so you can see what I'm doing at the moment. And you're always feel free to message me or send me an email if you're interested in either purchasing or just chatting. I'm always available.